I'm Estelle Thompson, 31 years old, and I've always been the family disappointment. My father never hid his preference for my brother Jackson, grooming him to take over our family's construction business while I was pushed aside. When Dad died unexpectedly, I returned home for the will reading, expecting nothing. Jackson publicly mocked me, saying I'd only inherit Dad's doll collection while he'd get everything valuable. But that smirk disappeared when the lawyer started speaking. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how my brother's arrogance led to his spectacular downfall. Growing up in the Thompson family meant living in the shadow of Thompson Construction, a mid-sized but highly respected company my father built from scratch over 30 years. Our family name adorned buildings across 3 states, and Dad made sure everyone knew it was his legacy. Harold Thompson was the quintessential self-made man, stubborn, traditional, and firmly believed that his business should pass to his son, not his daughter. My brother Jackson was 5 years older, and Dad's pride and joy from the moment he was born. While I was taught to be polite and proper, Jackson was encouraged to be assertive and dominant. Dad would take him to construction sites from the age of 6, proudly introducing him as the future of Thompson Construction. Meanwhile, I was enrolled in ballet classes and etiquette lessons because that's what proper young ladies do. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Mom was my saving grace. Elizabeth Thompson was gentle but fiercely intelligent. She had a business degree that she never got to use because Dad insisted she stay home after Jackson was born. She recognized something in me that Dad refused to see: a natural head for business and a creative mind that could envision spaces in ways Jackson never could. She'd sneak business journals into my room and discuss them with me when Dad wasn't around. "Your father means well," she'd tell me, "but he's stuck in his generation's thinking. Times are changing. Estelle, women run companies now, remember that." When I was 14, Mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. She fought hard for 2 years, but eventually the disease took her from us. Her death shattered our family in different ways. Dad buried himself in work, becoming even more distant and rigid. Jackson at 21 started acting out, drinking, partying, showing up late to the office training Dad had arranged for him. For me, losing Mom meant losing my only ally in the house. Without her buffer, Dad's dismissal of my ideas and abilities became even more pronounced. I'd bring home straight A's in math and business classes, and he'd barely glance at my report card. Meanwhile, Jackson's C- in basic accounting was met with, "Well, that's why you'll have accountants working for you someday." The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I developed a detailed business plan for a sustainable housing initiative that could have expanded Thompson Construction into an emerging market. I spent months researching, creating financial projections, and designing sample homes. When I finally gathered the courage to show Dad, he flipped through it for less than a minute before pushing it aside. "This isn't what we do, Estelle. It's cute that you're interested in the business, but this eco-friendly nonsense is just a trend. Thompson Construction builds solid traditional structures. Jackson understands that." Jackson, who happened to be in the room, picked up my business plan and laughed. "Maybe you should start a little decorating company instead, Stay. You've always been good at playing with dollhouses." The moment I turned 18 and graduated high school, I left home. I had saved nearly every dollar from my part-time job since I was 15, and with a small inheritance from my maternal grandmother, I had just enough to move to Portland and enroll in business school. Dad seemed almost relieved when I announced I was leaving, as if my presence had always been an uncomfortable reminder that he didn't know how to relate to a daughter. Over the next decade, I built my own path. After college, I worked for an interior design firm for 3 years before branching out on my own. I started with one small storefront called Thompson Designed, a subtle nod to the family name I still carried despite everything. My specialty became repurposing vintage furniture and incorporating sustainable materials into modern design. Exactly the kind of nonsense trend my father had dismissed. By 30, I had expanded to 3 locations across Oregon and Washington with a growing online presence. My business was nothing compared to Thompson Construction scale, but it was profitable, sustainable, and completely mine. I created it without the Thompson name opening doors for me, without my father's connections or capital. During those years, my contact with family dwindled to almost nothing. I'd send Dad a Christmas card and receive a formal secretary-penned response. Jackson called occasionally, usually when he was drunk, to boast about deals he'd closed or to check if I was still playing with furniture. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had married a woman named Audrey from a wealthy local family, a union that Dad apparently heartily approved of. I built a new life with new friends who knew nothing of Thompson Construction or my estrangement from my family. I dated occasionally, but always found myself holding back, afraid to fully trust anyone. After growing up feeling so thoroughly dismissed by my own father, my business became my primary relationship, something I could pour my heart into that actually gave back what I put in. The call came on a Tuesday morning in April. I was in the middle of reviewing fabric samples for a major hotel contract when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize from my hometown. Something made me answer instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Is this Estelle Thompson?" a somber male voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is Gregory Jenkins, your father's attorney. I'm sorry to inform you that Harold Thompson passed away last night from a heart attack. He was at home and the doctors say it was quick." The fabric samples slipped from my fingers, scattering across the floor in an explosion of colors and textures. A heart attack. Quick, the words echoed in my mind as I tried to process what they meant. My father, the indomitable Harold Thompson, was gone. Miss Thompson, are you there? Yes, I'm here. I managed to say I'm just surprised. He was only 68, 69 actually. Jenkins corrected gently. His birthday was last month. I felt a pang of guilt. I hadn't remembered his birthday. When was the last time I had? 3 years ago. 4. The funeral is scheduled for Saturday, he continued. Your brother thought you would want to know. Jackson thought I would want to know. Not that Jackson wanted me there, just that I should be informed. The distinction was clear. I'll be there, I said, surprised by my own quick decision. Thank you for calling, Mr. Jenkins. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk for nearly an hour. The emotions washing over me were complex and contradictory. Grief, certainly, he was my father after all, but also hollow emptiness for the relationship we never had, the approval I never received. And underneath it all, a strange sense of finality. Whatever chance we had to reconcile was gone forever. I arranged for my assistant manager to handle operations for the next week, and booked a flight back to Westbrook, the small city outside of Seattle where I'd grown up. As the plane descended through clouds heavy with spring rain, I gazed out at the evergreen landscape and felt like I was traveling back in time rather than just across state lines. The rental car I picked up at the airport seemed too new and shiny for the journey into my past. I drove the familiar route to my childhood home with a growing sense of unreality. 12 years had passed since I'd last seen this house. A sprawling Tudor-style home that Dad had built when his business first became successful when I was just 5 years old. The house looked smaller than I remembered and noticeably less maintained. The once immaculate gardens were overgrown in spots. The paint on the trim was peeling, and one of the decorative shutters hung at an angle. Dad had always been meticulous about the property's appearance. This neglect spoke volumes. I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage before finally approaching the front door. Before I could ring the bell, it swung open to reveal Jackson. My brother had changed dramatically. The athletic build I remembered had given way to a substantial punch, and his once thick hair was thinning despite expensive-looking treatments. His face was puffy with broken capillaries across his nose and cheeks, suggesting years of heavy drinking. Well, stay finally returns, he said, blocking the doorway. Thought you might not bother coming at all. Hello, Jackson, I said evenly. I'm sorry about Dad, he gave a dismissive wave. Yeah, well, he was asking about you the week before, wondering if you'd ever come home. Guess you're too late now. The barb hit its mark, but I kept my expression neutral. May I come in? He stepped aside reluctantly. Audrey's in the living room with some of Dad's business associates. Try not to embarrass the family name. The interior of the house was like a time capsule with the same heavy furniture and dark wood paneling I remembered from childhood. The only differences were the layer of dust on the less used surfaces and the smell of cigarettes and something sour underneath, perhaps spilled alcohol that hadn't been properly cleaned. In the living room, a group of middle-aged men in suits stood talking in low voices, while a blonde woman directed a caterer where to place a tray of sandwiches. She looked up as I entered, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to a practiced social smile. "All, what a surprise," Audrey said, approaching with arms outstretched for an air kiss that never quite made contact with my cheek. "Jackson wasn't sure you'd make it. I just heard yesterday," I explained. "How are you holding up?" "Oh, managing. Someone has to keep things running," she said with a pointed glance toward Jackson, who had already helped himself to what was clearly not his first drink of the day. Harold's death was so unexpected. The business needs leadership now more than ever. One of the men approached, extending his hand. "Frank Donovan, I worked with your father for 20 years. You must be the daughter from Oregon, the daughter from Oregon. Not Estelle, not the business owner, just the daughter who left." I shook his hand and nodded. "Harold mentioned you had some kind of shop," he continued, clearly struggling to show interest. "3 stores, actually, interior design and sustainable furniture. Ah, interesting hobby." Before I could correct him, Jackson interrupted, voice raised to address the room. "Everyone, the funeral home called. They need us to bring Dad's suit within the hour. Audrey, can you handle that? I need to speak with Miller about the Johnson contract." The message was clear. Business continued, and Jackson was in charge. Now I was just a visitor expected to stay out of the way. After the business associates departed, I slipped out to reconnect with the town. Westbrook had changed in subtle ways. The old movie theater converted to a microbrewery. New housing developments on the outskirts, the high school renovated with a modern facade. I drove past Thompson Construction's headquarters, a 2-story brick building with the company logo prominently displayed. The parking lot was half empty, and a now hearing sign hung in the window, something I'd never seen during Dad's heyday. I stopped at Marlene's Diner, a local institution where Mom used to take me for milkshakes after ballet lessons. Remarkably, Marlene herself was still behind the counter, older but with the same buff hairstyle and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "As I live and breathe," she exclaimed when I walked in. "Estelle Thompson, girl, get over here." She enveloped me in a hug that smelled of coffee and hairspray. "I heard about your daddy, terrible shame. He wasn't the same these past few years, you know." "What do you mean?" I asked, sliding onto a stool at the counter. Marlene glanced around before leaning in. "After his health scare 3 years back, minor stroke, did you know he changed? Softer somehow, would come in here and talk about regrets." She raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "Mentioned you quite a bit." I felt a constriction in my chest. "He never called me. Harold Thompson wasn't a man who knew how to back down or admit mistakes, she said, placing a coffee in front of me without asking, but he kept a newspaper clipping about your business by the register. Showed it to me more than once. The thought of my father carrying around news of my success felt like a punch to the stomach. All those years of silence and he'd been proud, interested. It was too late to know for sure. And that brother of yours, Marlene, continued, lowering her voice further, running that company into the ground from what I hear. 3 rounds of layoffs last year. Harold was fit to be tied. This was news to me. Thompson Construction had always been solid, conservative in its approach, but reliable and profitable. Layoffs were unheard of in Dad's management style. What happened, I asked. Can't say for certain, but your brother's got expensive tastes and not half the business sense your daddy had. That wife of his isn't helping matters. Woman never saw a luxury she didn't think she deserved. As I left the diner, Marlene's words stayed with me. The neglected house, the now hearing sign, Jackson's physical deterioration all pointed to trouble beneath the surface, trouble that had started before Dad's death. I checked into the town's single hotel rather than staying at the house. That night I lay awake thinking about the father I thought I knew and the man Marlene had described, someone capable of change, of regret, someone who had kept track of me from afar. Sleep eluded me as I wondered what other surprises awaited at tomorrow's funeral and the reading of the will that would follow. The funeral passed in a blur of somber faces and polite condolences from people who barely remembered me or only knew me as Harold's girl who moved away. Jackson delivered a eulogy that focused primarily on Dad's business acumen and the legacy he was proud to continue. I wasn't asked to speak, which was both a relief and a final reminder of my outsider status. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3:00 the day after the funeral at the offices of Jenkins and Associates. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a simple black sheath dress and the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother. The law office occupied the second floor of one of Westbrook's oldest buildings with wood-paneled walls and windows that had witnessed nearly a century of the town's legal proceedings. Gregory Jenkins greeted me at the reception area. He was older than I expected, well into his 70s, with sparse white hair and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his pale blue eyes. Miss Thompson, thank you for coming. I was your father's attorney for over 40 years and I knew your grandfather before him. He led me to a conference room where several people were already seated. Jackson and Audrey occupied chairs at the far end of the table. Jackson was wearing an expensive suit that strained across his midsection, while Audrey was dressed in a black designer outfit that seemed more appropriate for a Manhattan cocktail hour than a will reading in Westbrook. Frank Donovan was there along with 2 other men I recognized from the house. A woman in her 60s sat quietly in the corner. Martha Peters, Dad's housekeeper for the past 20 years. She gave me a small, sad smile when our eyes met. Now that everyone is here, we can begin, Jenkins said, taking a seat at the head of the table. He placed a leather portfolio in front of him and adjusted his glasses. Before I read Harold's last will and testament, he asked me to play this recording. Jenkins pressed a button on a small digital recorder. After a moment of static, my father's voice filled the room. If you're listening to this, then I'm gone. Never was one for long goodbyes or emotional speeches, so I'll keep this brief. I built Thompson Construction from nothing, worked every day of my life to make it something to be proud of, made mistakes along the way, especially with people. Business was always easier to understand than family. There was a pause and I heard him clear his throat. I've made my decisions about the distribution of my estate carefully. Greg has all the documents in order. Some of you might be surprised, others won't. All I ask is that you respect my wishes even if you don't understand them. The recording ended. Jackson shifted in his seat, looking impatient. Audrey placed a manicured hand on his arm, her expression calculating. I'll now read the will, Jenkins said, opening the portfolio. He began with the standard legal preamble before getting to the specific bequests. Martha, the housekeeper, received a generous sum that brought tears to her eyes. Dad's fishing cabin on Lake Chalon went to Frank Donovan, his oldest friend. There were smaller bequests to various employees and charitable organizations. As these minor items were addressed, Jackson grew increasingly agitated, drumming his fingers on the table. Audrey kept shooting glances at her watch. Can we get to the important parts? Jackson finally interrupted. We all know the house and the company are coming to me. No need to drag this out. Jenkins paused, looking at Jackson over the rim of his glasses. If you'll allow me to proceed in the proper order, Mr. Thompson. Fine, just hurry it up. Jackson turned to me with a smirk. Sorry, Stay, I know you came all this way, but you'll be heading back to your little shop soon enough. Dad's leaving you his doll collection, right? The one Mom started for you. My stomach tightened. The doll collection had been a point of contention throughout my childhood. Mom had given me my first porcelain doll when I was 5 and it became a tradition. One new doll each birthday. After she died, I'd left the collection behind, unable to bear the reminder of her absence. Dad had apparently kept it all these years. I'm getting the house and the business. Jackson continued, loudly looking around the table as if seeking appreciation for his generosity. She just gets the dolls. Seems fair considering she abandoned the family. Audrey tittered and even Frank Donovan gave an uncomfortable chuckle. The humiliation burned through me, but I kept my expression neutral, refusing to give Jackson the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Actually, Jenkins said, his voice suddenly sharp, if you'd allow me to continue, there are some details you might find relevant. Jackson waved a dismissive hand. Go ahead, read the part where Dad makes me CEO. Jenkins cleared his throat and continued reading from the document. To my son Jackson Harold Thompson, I leave my collection of vintage automobiles valued at approximately $800,000 and a 15% non-controlling interest in Thompson Construction. The room went silent. Jackson's face froze in mid-smirk. 15%. He finally sputtered. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, Jenkins said calmly, if you'll allow me to finish. What about the house, the company who gets controlling interest? Jackson's voice had risen nearly to a shout. Jenkins adjusted his glasses again, his expression unreadable. To my daughter Estelle Elizabeth Thompson, I leave the family residence at 42 Oakwood Drive. My personal effects and my controlling interest in Thompson Construction consisting of 85% of outstanding shares. The world seemed to stop. I stared at Jenkins, certain I had misheard him. Dad had left me the company. This is ridiculous. Jackson was on his feet now, face purple with rage. Dad built that company for me. He trained me to run it. She hasn't even been here for 12 years. Mr. Thompson, please calm yourself, Jenkins said. There's more to explain. I don't need explanations. I need you to fix this obvious mistake. Jackson slammed his fist on the table. She knows nothing about construction. She decorates houses for God's sake. Actually, Jenkins said, his voice cutting through Jackson's tirade, the company was never in your father's name to leave to anyone. It was in your mother's name, initially transferred to Estelle when she turned 18. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt as though I'd stepped into an alternate reality. What are you talking about? I finally managed to ask. Jenkins removed a document from the portfolio. Thompson Construction was legally established in Elizabeth Thompson's name from its founding. Your father did this as a tax and liability strategy common at the time. When your mother passed away, her shares were held in trust until you reached adulthood, at which point ownership legally transferred to you. That's impossible, Jackson said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Dad ran the company, everyone knows that. Harold managed the company as the designated trustee and executive, Jenkins explained, but he never owned it outright. This arrangement protected the company from potential lawsuits related to construction projects as well as any personal financial difficulties Harold might have encountered. Why would he put it in Estelle's name and not mine? Jackson demanded. According to your father, because Estelle showed the business acumen and responsibility he felt necessary for ownership. Jenkins looked at me. He's been following your career with great interest, Miss Thompson. He was quite impressed with how you built your own successful business without any family assistance. Audrey, who had been whispering frantically to Jackson, suddenly turned to me with a wide, insincere smile. Estelle, we should discuss this as a family. I'm sure we can come to some arrangement that benefits everyone. There's nothing to discuss, Jenkins interjected. The ownership is legally established and has been for years. Harold simply never informed either of you of the arrangement. I'll contest it, Jackson threatened, looking wildly around the room. This can't be legal. You're welcome to try, Jenkins said mildly. But I assure you every document is in order. Your father was meticulous about his legal affairs. While Jackson continued to bluster and threaten, I sat in stunned silence. All those years feeling dismissed and undervalued, and Dad had legally entrusted me with his life's work. It made no sense. And yet, as I thought back to my mother's quiet insistence that I learn about business, her smuggled journals and lessons, I wondered if she had known all along. Had this been their plan from the beginning, or had Dad made this decision later, perhaps after watching Jackson's management style? There must be some mistake, I finally said, my voice hardly more than a whisper. There is no mistake, Miss Thompson, Jenkins assured me. Your father knew exactly what he was doing. As the reality of the situation sank in, I couldn't help but notice the dramatic shift in how people were looking at me. Frank Donovan, who had dismissed my business as a hobby just days before, was now studying me with newfound respect. Martha, the housekeeper, was smiling openly. Even Audrey's attitude had transformed. She was now trying to catch my eye, nodding encouragingly whenever I glanced her way. Only Jackson remained hostile, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. This isn't over, he hissed as Jenkins wrapped up the meeting. You have no idea what you're getting into, stay. As we all filed out of the conference room, I felt dizzy with the implications of what had just happened. Not only was I suddenly the owner of a substantial construction company, but I had apparently been the legal owner for years without knowing it. The family home was mine. The legacy Dad had always implied was Jackson's birthright had legally been mine since I was 18. The irony was almost too much to bear. All those years of feeling like I didn't matter, and Dad had quietly placed his entire legacy in my hands. I just couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it all as I watched Jackson storm out of the office. Audrey hurrying behind him, already on her phone, likely calling their lawyer. Miss Thompson, if you have a moment, Gregory Jenkins gestured for me to return to the conference room after the others had departed. There are some additional matters we should discuss privately. Still dazed, I followed him back inside. He closed the door and took a seat beside me rather than across the table, creating a more intimate atmosphere. I imagine you have questions, he said, removing his glasses and polishing them with a handkerchief. About $1 million, I admitted. How long has this arrangement been in place? Did Mom know? Why didn't Dad ever tell me? Jenkins replaced his glasses and folded his hands on the table. The company was established in your mother's name in 1990, the year you were born. It was her idea, actually. Elizabeth was a remarkably intelligent woman with excellent business instincts. The revelation that this had been Mom's idea brought tears to my eyes. All those secret business lessons suddenly made sense. She had been preparing me. When Elizabeth became ill, Jenkins continued. She and your father revised their estate plan. The ownership of the company would transfer to you upon reaching adulthood, but Harold would continue to manage it until he deemed you ready or until his death. But why keep it secret? Why let me believe I meant nothing to the business? Jenkins, your father was a complicated man, Estelle. He believed in testing people and making them prove themselves. When you left home and started your own business, he saw it as confirmation that you had the necessary drive and independence. He could have told me, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice, all those years of feeling worthless in his eyes. Harold was not adept at expressing his feelings, Jenkins acknowledged, but he was immensely proud of what you accomplished on your own. He followed your career closely, subscribed to design magazines where your work was featured, kept newspaper clippings about your store openings. He reached into his portfolio and withdrew a folded newspaper article, a feature on Thompson designed from 3 years ago when I opened my third location. The paper was worn at the creases as if it had been unfolded and reread many times. He carried this in his wallet, Jenkins said softly. I took the article with trembling hands, noticing my father's fingerprints still visible on the edges of the paper. The thought of him secretly keeping track of my career, perhaps even feeling proud, was overwhelming. There's something else you should know, Jenkins continued. Your father began to have concerns about Jackson's management of the company about 5 years ago. Jackson was making impulsive decisions, taking on risky projects, and using company funds for personal expenses. Is that why there were layoffs? Jenkins nodded. The company's financial position has been deteriorating. Harold tried to mentor Jackson to rein him in, but their relationship became strained. In the last 2 years, your father effectively resumed day-to-day control to prevent further damage. Does Jackson have debts? Is that what this is about? I'm afraid so. Your brother has accumulated significant personal debt, gambling primarily, though there are also extravagant purchases, investments in questionable ventures. He was counting on inheriting control of the company to solve his financial problems. The pieces were falling into place. Jackson's desperate reaction now made sense. He needed the company to bail him out of trouble. What about the house Jackson and Audrey have been living there? Are they expecting me to evict them? The house has been in your name since you turned 25, Jenkins revealed, another part of your parents' plan. Harold retained a life estate, allowing him to live there until his death, but the ownership transferred to you 6 years ago. Jackson has been paying rent to a trust in your name, though I doubt he realized it. My head was spinning with these revelations. For years I believed myself cut out of the family legacy, when in reality I had been the legal owner of nearly everything. There's one more thing, Jenkins said, reaching into his briefcase. He withdrew a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. Harold asked me to give you this privately. I took the envelope but didn't open it immediately. Mr. Jenkins, why would Dad create this elaborate arrangement but never tell me? It makes no sense. The elderly attorney considered the question carefully. I've known your father since we were boys, Estelle. He was always methodical, always 3 steps ahead. I believe he wanted to see what you would do on your own without the Thompson name opening doors for you. He wanted to be certain you had earned the responsibility. And Jackson, did Dad know about the gambling debts? He discovered them last year. It was a significant disappointment to him. So this is punishment for Jackson and a test for me. Jenkins shook his head. I don't believe your father saw it that way. I think he genuinely came to believe you were better suited to preserve his legacy. The 15% interest he left Jackson is generous considering the circumstances, and the vintage car collection is quite valuable. As Jenkins prepared to leave, he handed me a thick folder. These are the essential documents regarding the company: financial statements, current projects, personnel information. Take some time to review them. My office will assist with any transition issues. After he departed, I remained in the conference room staring at the envelope from my father. Finally, I took a deep breath and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Dad's precise handwriting. Esta, if you're reading this, then Jenkins has explained the arrangements concerning the company and the house. I owe you an explanation, though I'm not sure you'll understand or forgive me. When you were born, your mother made me promise that you would always be secure, that you would have opportunities regardless of the world's prejudices against women in business. The legal arrangement was her idea initially, but as you grew I came to see her wisdom. You have your mother's sharp mind and my stubbornness, a powerful combination. I recognized it early, but I was afraid. Afraid that if I acknowledged your potential you would never develop the hunger to prove yourself, the resilience necessary to succeed in a difficult industry. So I pushed you away. I let you believe you had no place in the legacy I was building. It was cruel, and I regret the pain it caused you. But watching you build your own business, seeing your success earned entirely through your own merit, confirmed what Elizabeth always knew. You were the right choice to carry on Thompson Construction. Jackson has his strengths, but business sense isn't among them. The company would not survive his leadership, a fact I realized too late. I've made many mistakes, Estelle. My greatest was never telling you how proud I am of the woman you've become. Not because of anything I did, but despite it. The company is yours. It always has been, Dad. Tears flowed freely as I read his words. The father I thought had never valued me had been watching all along, had been proud of me. The revelation was both healing and painful. Healing to know I had mattered to him. Painful to think of the relationship we might have had if only he'd been able to tell me while he was alive. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my purse, then opened the folder Jenkins had left. The financial statements confirmed what he had said. Thompson Construction was in trouble. Revenue had declined steadily over the past 3 years. Expenses had increased, and there were several concerning notes about potential litigation from dissatisfied clients. The company wasn't on the verge of collapse, but the trajectory was clear. Without intervention, the business my father had built over decades would fail within a few years. And now, somehow, it was my responsibility to save it. As I gathered the documents and prepared to leave, I felt the weight of my father's legacy settling onto my shoulders. It was a burden I had never expected to bear, never been prepared for, and yet somewhere beneath the shock and uncertainty there was a spark of determination. I had built my own company from nothing. Perhaps I could save my father's as well. The next morning I arrived at Thompson Construction headquarters early before regular business hours. Jenkins had provided me with keys and security codes, explaining that as the legal owner, I had every right to access the building and records. It felt strange to use them, like I was somehow trespassing despite the documentation confirming my ownership. The offices were quiet and dated. Oak desks, beige walls, chunky desktop computers that looked at least 5 years old. Dad had never been one for unnecessary upgrades or trendy office designs. If it worked, he kept it. I made my way to his corner office, a space I had visited only a handful of times as a child. The name plate on the door still read Harold Thompson, President. Inside, everything was meticulously organized. The desk was clear except for a computer, a leather blot, and a single framed photograph that caught me by surprise. It was me at my college graduation. A picture I didn't even know he had. I sat in his chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrests, and tried to absorb the reality that this was now mine. The computer was password protected, but Jenkins had provided that as well. Elizabeth J. 1, 1990, my mother's name, and the year of my birth. The files revealed the full extent of the company's troubles. Jackson had indeed made a series of poor decisions, accepting contracts with insufficient margins, hiring subcontractors who delivered substandard work, approving expensive materials without adjusting project budgets. But more concerning were the financial transfers, large sums, moving from company accounts to Jackson's personal account under the label executive compensation or advance against profits. In the past year alone, he had withdrawn over $300,000 above his stated salary. No wonder the company was struggling. As I dug deeper, I discovered emails between Dad and Jackson spanning the past 5 years. The earliest showed Dad patiently explaining errors in Jackson's approach, offering guidance. Over time, the tone changed. Dad's emails became increasingly frustrated, Jackson's defensive and occasionally hostile. The most recent exchanges from just weeks before Dad's death were alarming. Jackson, the Westfield project is now officially over budget by 22%. This is the third project this quarter with similar issues. We cannot continue this pattern. I'm pulling you from project management effective immediately. See me in my office tomorrow, Dad. Jackson's reply was short and bitter. Fine, take it away like everything else. You never thought I was good enough anyway. I've got other opportunities lined up that don't involve you looking over my shoulder constantly. Jay, other opportunities? What did that mean? I searched Jackson's email folders and found correspondence with a developer from Seattle about a potential position he had been planning to leave the company. There were also emails with someone named Victor about investments and sure things that had a distinctly gambling-related tone. As morning turned to afternoon, I discovered a folder labeled Estelle hidden deep in Dad's personal files. Inside were dozens of articles about my business, photos of my store locations pulled from my website, even customer reviews. He had been tracking every aspect of my professional life from afar. There was also a spreadsheet showing regular purchases from Thompson Designed, furniture for model homes, office renovations, client gifts. Dad had been one of my biggest clients for years, ordering through an interior designer so I wouldn't know the pieces were for Thompson Construction. He had been supporting my business while maintaining his distance. The revelation was bittersweet. He had been proud enough to follow my career, to secretly support my business, but not enough to tell me so to my face. What kind of man watches his daughter succeed from the shadows, never reaching out to say, "Well done"? A knock on the office door interrupted my thoughts. A woman in her 50s with short gray hair and practical clothing stood in the doorway looking uncertain. "Excuse me," the receptionist said. "You're Harold's daughter. I'm Nancy Winters, Chief Financial Officer." "Yes, I'm Estelle Thompson." I stood and extended my hand. "It's nice to meet you." Nancy shook my hand firmly, her expression cautious. "I heard about the wool reading yesterday. News travels fast in this company. I thought I should introduce myself. I appreciate that." "I'm still trying to get my bearings." Nancy glanced at the computer screen which displayed the financial records I'd been reviewing. "I see you found some of our challenges. That's one word for it. These withdrawals by my brother, were you aware of them?" NY's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Your father and I had several discussions about them. He finally put a stop to them about 6 months ago, which led to some heated arguments with Jackson. But the damage was already done." "Yes." She hesitated, then continued more confidently. Your father was working on a recovery plan before he died. Would you like to see it? I nodded, and Nancy retrieved a file from her office. The plan was detailed and practical, restructuring debt, refocusing on the company's core competencies, improving quality control, rebuilding client relationships damaged during Jackson's management period. Dad developed this himself, I asked, impressed by the thoroughness. With some input from the management team, he was determined to save the company before she trailed off before handing it over to me. I finished for her. Nancy studied me for a moment. He talked about you, more in the last couple of years. He kept track of your business, showed us your website. He was proud in his own way. Why didn't he just tell me? She shrugged. Harold wasn't good with emotional conversations, but he said more than once that you had built something impressive without using the Thompson name as a crutch. That meant something to him. As Nancy and I continued discussing the company's situation, more employees arrived for the day. Word of my presence spread quickly, and various department heads found reasons to pass by the office, trying to catch a glimpse of Harold Thompson's long-absent daughter, who had suddenly inherited everything. By late afternoon, I had spoken with most of the senior staff. The picture that emerged was consistent. A once solid company weakened by Jackson's mismanagement and extravagance, now cautiously optimistic about a change in leadership, but uncertain about what that meant for their jobs and the company's future. As I prepared to leave for the day, Nancy handed me a small key. This is for your father's personal storage room in the basement. You might want to look through it when you have time. The storage room turned out to be a small, climate-controlled space filled with carefully labeled boxes. One entire section was marked Estelle with dates corresponding to different periods of my life. With growing amazement, I opened them to find report cards, school projects, newspaper clippings about academic awards I'd won, a complete record of my life that Dad had maintained even after I left home. In one box, I found something unexpected. Printouts of customer orders from Thompson, designed attached to photographs showing how the pieces had been used in Thompson construction projects. Dad had not only purchased my furniture but had proudly incorporated it into his buildings. The final box I opened contained dozens of letters addressed to me in Dad's handwriting, letters he had never sent. I opened one at random dated 3 years earlier. Estelle, saw your interview in Design Monthly today. You spoke with clarity and confidence about sustainable materials. Your mother would have been so proud. I am proud, though I haven't earned the right to tell you so. The desk you designed for executive offices would be perfect for our new project. Ordering 3 through Wilson Interiors, so you won't know they're for Thompson Construction. Silly pride, I suppose. Maybe someday I'll find the courage to mail one of these letters. Dad, letter after letter revealed the same pattern. A father watching his daughter's success from afar, collecting evidence of her achievements, supporting her business anonymously, but never bridging the emotional gap he had created. As I sat surrounded by these physical manifestations of my father's complicated love, I began to understand him better. Harold Thompson had been capable of love, but incapable of expressing it directly. He had shown his pride through actions, keeping track of my accomplishments, buying my products, even structuring his entire estate to benefit me, but could never bring himself to simply say the words I had so desperately needed to. Here, the most recent letter was dated just 2 weeks before his death. Estelle, doctor says, my heart isn't what it used to be, makes a man think about time and mistakes. So many things I should have said to you. The company is in trouble. Jackson's doing mostly, though I share the blame for not seeing his weaknesses sooner. Jenkins knows what to do when the time comes. The company was always meant to be yours. I hope you'll understand why I kept silent all these years. I wanted you to become the woman you are without the weight of my expectations. I should call you. I will call you Dad, but he never did. Whatever courage he had mustered while writing those words had failed him in the end, and now it was too late for the conversation we should have had years ago. I carefully repacked the letters, wiping away tears. The father I thought I knew, cold, dismissive, disappointed, had never really existed. In his place was a man too bound by his own limitations to reach out to the daughter. He secretly admired a man who expressed his love through silent observation and behind-the-scenes support rather than words and embrace. It didn't erase the pain of those years feeling unwanted, but it reframed them in a way that made the pain more bearable. As I locked the storage room and made my way back upstairs, I felt a strange sense of peace beginning to take root. Dad had been proud of me after all. He just hadn't known how to say it. I had just returned to my hotel room when my phone rang with an unknown local number. Assuming it was someone from Thompson Construction with more questions, I answered. Is this Estelle? A woman's voice asked quietly. Yes, who's this? It's Audrey Jackson's wife. I think we need to talk. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a corner booth at a coffee shop across town from the family home. Audrey looked different from her polished appearance at the Will reading. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and a sweater. Jackson doesn't know I'm meeting you, she said immediately. He'd be furious. Why are you here then? She fidgeted with her wedding ring. Things are about to get ugly and I thought you deserved some warning. Jackson is meeting with lawyers today. He's planning to contest the will claim your father was mentally incompetent when he made his arrangements. That won't work, I said confidently. The company has been in my name since I was 18. Dad didn't make that decision on his deathbed, I know, but Jackson's desperate. She lowered her voice further. The gambling is worse than anyone realizes. He owes over $500,000 to some very dangerous people. He was counting on the inheritance to pay them off. The revelation sent a chill through me. Is that why he's been taking money from the company? Audrey nodded. It started small, using the company credit card for personal expenses, padding his expense reports, then direct transfers disguised as bonuses. Your father caught on eventually and cut off his access, which only made things worse. Jackson started borrowing from loan sharks. Why are you telling me this? She twisted her wedding ring again, and I noticed it was loose on her finger as if she'd lost weight recently. I filed for divorce last week. Jackson doesn't know yet. The papers will be served tomorrow. I'm sorry, I said automatically, though I barely knew this woman. Don't be. I married him because my parents thought a connection to Thompson Construction would be advantageous. It took me too long to realize the man I married wasn't the successful businessman he pretended to be. She took a deep breath. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you. There's something else you should know. What? Jackson's been approaching Thompson Construction clients, telling them he's starting his own company. He's trying to poach business, promising lower rates. He's already convinced Westfield Development to hold off on signing their new contract until he's ready to launch. Anger flared at this betrayal. Not only had Jackson mismanaged the company, withdrawn funds improperly, and accumulated gambling debts, but he'd actively been working to undermine the business from within. Thank you for telling me, I said, my mind already racing with how to address this new threat. Audrey stood to leave. I'm not doing this for you. The Thompson name still means something in this town, and I don't want to see a good company destroyed by Jackson's selfishness. My father worked with your dad for years. He always said Harold Thompson was the most honest builder in the state. After she left, I immediately called Nancy Winters and arranged an emergency meeting with the executive team for that evening. If Jackson was planning to poach clients, we needed to move quickly to secure key relationships. The meeting ran late into the night as we developed a strategy to contact major clients, review all outstanding proposals, and shore up vulnerable business relationships. The team was initially hesitant with me. I was still an unknown quantity. The arranged daughter suddenly in charge. But as I demonstrated knowledge from my own business experience and a willingness to listen to their expertise, they gradually opened up. By the time we adjourned, we had a solid plan in place, and more importantly, I had begun to earn their trust. Several longtime employees shared stories about working with my father, filling in pieces of the man I had never fully known. I returned to the hotel exhausted, but with a growing sense of purpose. Thompson Construction could be saved, and in the process, perhaps I could finally connect with the legacy my father had always intended for me. That feeling of optimism was short-lived. At 8 the following morning, as I was having coffee in the hotel restaurant before heading to the office, Jackson stormed in. His face was flushed with anger, his movements erratic. You think you're so clever, he hissed, looming over my table, swooping in and taking everything after abandoning the family for years. Jackson, this isn't the place. Shut up, he snapped loud enough that other diners turned to stare. You have no right to that company, you know nothing about construction. I kept my voice calm. I know enough about business to see that you've nearly run Dad's company into the ground. His face contorted with rage. You have no idea what I've been dealing with. I was here every day while you were playing with furniture and colors in Portland. I was the one handling everything when Dad got sick. Handling everything, is that what you call embezzling company funds and gambling them away? The color drained from his face. Who told you that, Audrey? That ungrateful. It doesn't matter who told me. The financial records make it pretty clear. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Jackson, we need to talk about this rationally. For a moment I thought he might refuse, but finally he dropped heavily into the chair, the fight seeming to drain out of him. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he muttered. Dad promised me the company would be mine. Did he actually promise that, or did you just assume it? Jackson stared at the table, not answering. The gambling debts, I continued. How bad is it really? He gave a hollow laugh. Bad enough that moving to another country has crossed my mind, but they'd probably find me. Who is they? People you don't want to know. He finally looked up and I was struck by how old he suddenly appeared. The boyish entitlement replaced by haggarded desperation. I was going to fix it all once I had control of the company. I could have taken out loans, restructured, made everything right by digging the hole deeper. I pointed out, that's not fixing anything, Jackson. What do you know about it? You've never been in this kind of trouble. Because I don't gamble with money, I don't have. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the hotel entrance. Audrey walked in accompanied by a man in a suit who was clearly a process server. When she spotted us, she froze momentarily before squaring her shoulders and approaching. Jackson, she said with forced composure, I was looking for you at home. What's he doing here? Jackson asked, eyeing the man with suspicion. Mr. Thompson, the server asked, I have documents for you. As Jackson was served with divorce papers, his face cycled through shock, hurt, and finally settling on anger. You're leaving me now when everything's falling apart. Everything's been falling apart for years, Audrey replied quietly. I just finally admitted it to myself. After they left, Jackson storming out Audrey with quiet dignity. I sat alone trying to process the rapid dissolution of what remained of my family. Despite everything, Jackson was still my brother, and seeing him so destroyed brought me no satisfaction. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. News of the ownership change at Thompson Construction spread through Westbrook's business community. Some reactions were skeptical. What did Harold's daughter from Portland know about running a construction company? Others were cautiously optimistic, especially after hearing about my success with my own business. I moved temporarily into Dad's office, spending days reviewing projects, meeting employees, and visiting construction sites. The work was different from my interior design business, but the fundamentals of good management were the same. Clear communication, attention to detail, respecting the expertise of skilled professionals, and maintaining strong client relationships. Jackson, meanwhile, had gone from threatening legal action to virtual disappearance. According to gossip that reached me through company channels, he had been staying with a friend since Audrey asked him to leave the house, drinking heavily and making increasingly desperate calls to potential investors for his planned competing company. Those plans collapsed a week after the will reading when the story of his gambling debts and financial mismanagement leaked to local business circles. Suddenly, no one was returning his calls. The clients he had been courting renewed their contracts with Thompson Construction, some specifically requesting that I personally oversee their projects. The final confrontation came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was meeting with the project manager for a major renovation when my assistant interrupted to say Jackson was in the lobby demanding to see me. I found him soaking wet, unshaven, and swaying slightly. Either from alcohol or exhaustion, it was hard to tell. "We need to talk," he slurred privately. I led him to a small conference room and closed the door. "What do you want, Jackson?" "They're coming for me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm out of extensions, out of excuses. The people you owe money to," he nodded miserably. "They've given me until Friday to pay at least half of what I owe." After that, he drew a finger across his throat in a universal gesture. "Are you actually in physical danger, or is this another manipulation?" I asked, my sympathy warring with years of experience with his tactics. "You think I'd make this up?" He pulled up his shirt to reveal bruising across his ribs. "This was their friendly reminder yesterday." I winced despite myself. "What do you expect me to do? Loan me the money from the company. You can call it severance pay or whatever you want. I'll sign anything, go anywhere. Never bother you again. Just help me this one time." The pathetic figure before me bore little resemblance to the arrogant brother who had mocked me at the will reading. Part of me wanted to turn him away. Let him face the consequences of his actions for once in his privileged life. But another part remembered the little boy who had taught me to ride a bike before our relationship soured the brother I had once adored before Dad's favoritism poisoned everything between us. "I can't just hand over company money," I said finally. "That's exactly the kind of mismanagement that got us here. But I can help you on certain conditions." Hope flickered in his bloodshot eyes. "Anything. First, you sign a legal agreement renouncing any claim to Thompson Construction now or in the future. Second, you enter a rehabilitation program for your gambling addiction. Third, you work with the company's financial team to create a structured repayment plan for the money you've already taken. And in return, I'll personally loan you enough to satisfy your immediate debts. Not a gift, alone with interest to be repaid according to a schedule we'll establish. And I'll offer you a position entry-level, no management responsibilities, once you complete rehabilitation, a chance to learn the business properly." This time stared at me in disbelief. Why would you do that after everything I thought about the letters in Dad's storage room about opportunities forever lost through pride and poor communication? Because we're still family, and I think Dad would want me to give you a second chance. A real one, not the false confidence he gave you by never holding you accountable. The next day, Jackson signed all the necessary paperwork. The day after that, he checked into a rehabilitation facility specializing in gambling addiction. It would be months before I knew if the intervention had any lasting impact, but at least it was a start. With Jackson's legal claims settled and the immediate threat to the company neutralized, I could finally focus fully on rebuilding Thompson Construction. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time I felt equal to the task my father had secretly prepared me for all along. 6 months after that rainy confrontation with Jackson, I stood in the newly renovated lobby of Thompson Construction headquarters. The heavy oak furniture and beige walls had been replaced with a bright modern design that incorporated sustainable materials and locally crafted pieces, many from Thompson Design. The company logo remained the same, but beneath it now read, "Building on Tradition, Designing for the Future." The transformation went far deeper than aesthetics. After extensive review of the company's operations, I had implemented a restructuring plan that built on Dad's initial recovery strategy while incorporating fresh perspectives. We refocused on our core strengths, mid-sized commercial projects and high-end residential construction, while adding a new division specializing in sustainable building practices, an area where my background gave us a competitive edge. Nancy Winters remained as CFO, her institutional knowledge proving invaluable during the transition. Several longtime employees were promoted to key positions, bringing stability and continuity, while strategic new hires added expertise in emerging construction technologies and environmental compliance. The family home had undergone changes as well. Rather than moving in myself or selling it, I had renovated the property and converted it into a combination of office space and employee gathering area. The formal dining room where Dad had hosted business dinners became a daycare center for employees' children. The spacious backyard was transformed into a demonstration garden for sustainable landscaping techniques that we now offered clients. Most surprisingly, the room that had been mine as a child, later converted to Dad's home office, was restored as a showcase for my mother's doll collection, which I had finally brought out of storage. Each doll now had a small plaque explaining its significance and the year Mom had given it to me. It was my way of honoring both parents' legacies, Dad's business acumen, and Mom's nurturing foresight. Jackson completed his 90-day rehabilitation program, and true to my word, I offered him an entry-level position in the company. He started in the estimating department, learning the fundamental calculations that underpin successful project management, skills Dad should have insisted he master years ago. His recovery was not without setbacks. There were missed days, occasional relapses into old habits of entitlement moments when the resentment between us flared anew. But there were also glimpses of the brother I had once known before competition for Dad's approval drove us apart. His quick wit, his natural charm with clients, his genuine enthusiasm when a project came together well. One afternoon, as we were reviewing plans for a new mixed-juice development, he paused and looked at me with unusual seriousness. "You know, I used to hate the way Dad looked at you," he admitted. "Even when he was criticizing you, there was this underlying respect I never felt he had for me. No matter how much he praised me publicly, I always sensed he knew I wasn't quite measuring up. He didn't know how to balance honesty with encouragement." I replied, "He was too hard on me and too easy on you. Neither approach was right. I'm starting to understand why he left everything to you," Jackson said quietly. "I wouldn't have saved the company. I'd have run it into the ground trying to prove myself. It was the closest we'd come to a genuine reconciliation. And though I knew our relationship would always carry the scars of our upbringing, it was a beginning. The most profound healing, however, came through my deepening connection with the employees of Thompson Construction. As I spent time with people who had worked alongside Dad for decades, I gained a more complete picture of the man he had been. Not just the distant father I remembered, but the mentor who had guided many careers, the boss who had paid medical bills for employees in crisis, the builder who insisted on quality even when it reduced profits. Martin Ramirez, a project manager who had started as a laborer 30 years earlier, shared how Dad had paid for his night school classes and promoted him despite his limited English at the time. "Your father saw potential in people," Martin told me. "He wasn't always good at saying it, but he showed it through actions." That pattern appeared in story after story. A man who expressed his care through deeds rather than words, who created opportunities rather than offering praise. It didn't excuse his emotional distance, but it helped me understand it. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I established the Harold and Elizabeth Thompson Foundation, dedicated to supporting women and minorities entering the construction field. The foundation's first initiative was a scholarship program for students pursuing degrees in construction management, architectural design, or skilled trades, creating pathways into an industry that had traditionally been difficult for outsiders to enter. At the foundation launch event, I stood at the podium, looking out at faces both familiar and new. Longtime Thompson employees, current clients, industry partners, and the first cohort of scholarship recipients. Jackson sat in the front row, 1 year sober and slowly rebuilding his life. Audrey had moved away after their divorce was finalized, finding a fresh start in Chicago. "My father built things to last," I told the audience. "Buildings, yes, but also relationships and opportunities. His methods weren't always perfect, but his intentions were. He believed in creating solid foundations in construction and in life." I gestured to the scholarship recipients. "These young people represent the future my parents envisioned, one where talent and determination matter more than background or gender. The true inheritance my father left wasn't a company or a house. It was the understanding that we build our legacies day by day, brick by brick, through the opportunities we create for others." After the event, I returned to Dad's, now my office. On the desk sat a small display case containing the first doll Mom had ever given me, a porcelain figure with my mother's eyes and my father's determined expression. Beside it stood a framed photograph of the three of us from before Jackson was born, when we were briefly a complete family, possibilities still unfolding. I picked up the doll, remembering how Jackson had mockingly referred to it at the will reading. "She just gets the dolls," he had said, drawing laughter from people who thought material assets were the only inheritance that mattered. But sometimes the things we dismiss as insignificant carry the deepest value. This doll represented my mother's love, her foresight in establishing my legal ownership of the company, her quiet preparation for my future. It symbolized my father's complicated love as well, his silent pride, his careful preservation of my childhood treasures, his ultimate decision to entrust me with his life's work. The true inheritance wasn't the company, the house, or even the dolls. It was the resilience I had developed by building my own path, the perspective I had gained by standing outside the family business, the wisdom to recognize that leadership comes in many forms. As I placed the doll back in its case, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me since childhood. I had spent years believing I didn't matter to my father, only to discover I had mattered more than I ever knew. The pain of those years couldn't be erased, but it had shaped me into someone capable of carrying forward the best parts of both my parents' legacies while leaving behind the patterns that had caused so much hurt. Sometimes the greatest gift we receive isn't what we're given, but what we learn about ourselves in the process of earning it. I had inherited a company, but I had built the character needed to run it. I had inherited a name, but I had created my own reputation. I had inherited a complex family history, but I was writing a new chapter that honored the past while breaking free from its limitations. Have you ever discovered that something you thought was insignificant actually held profound meaning? How did it change your perspective on relationships in your life? Share your experiences in the comments below and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you. Remember, sometimes our greatest inheritances aren't things at all, but the strength we find within ourselves when faced with life's unexpected challenges. Music.